Hello and welcome to another edition of our Road to Rejoin meetings. This is hosted by Grassroots for Europe, and big thanks to Richard Wilson for letting us commandeer his Zoom for the evening and have a chat tonight. I'm joined by Elena Remigi and Cosi Doerfel Hill, who are two members of the In Limbo Project, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. So if you want to go first, Elena.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Graham, and thank you, Richard, for, giving us, and Graham, for giving us this platform. Yes, I'm Elena Remigi, and I'm an interpreter and a translator originally from Milan, Italy. I moved to the UK in 2005, so I've been living here for 16 years, and I've now become also a British citizen. I was very fortunate to be able to, to take British citizenship because it's not for everybody, unfortunately. When I moved, I remember being very excited to come here. I wanted to embrace this culture. Little did I know that Brexit would have happened, unfortunately. I did not move directly from Italy. I lived in Ireland. I was there for 6 years. And I had the chance of appreciating what freedom of movement meant. It was a rather seamless move from Italy to Ireland, to the UK. Whereas when I lived in Canada, I remember needing a visa, and there was a lot of red tape. So I will say maybe something later about the In Limbo Project. I will let Cosi introduce herself, but I just wanted to end by saying that I've always been interested in politics, but mainly Italian politics. But when the referendum campaign started, I felt the need of saying something and of having a voice, although like most EU citizens, at the time, I wasn't able to cast a vote. And now to you, Cosi, for the introduction.
Good evening. Thank you, Elena. And of course, huge thanks to Richard and Graham. Graham and I have, Graham has given me a platform on more than one occasion already, and we've often shared a platform. So it's lovely to do something with you again. My name is Cosi Doerfel Hill. Most people can't pronounce my surname, so I generally just go by Cosi. And I've been in the UK for such a long time. I came here as a 17-year-old to do A-levels, and then had a gap year, and then came back to university. And then, well, it just happens in Liverpool, I got stuck. So yeah, when I came to Liverpool, to the UK, Graham was still in primary school. That's how long ago. So of course, when there was the referendum campaign, I wasn't actually at all involved with this. It really passed me by. I was busy with other things. I was developing a business. I was raising 2 little kids who are British citizens. And around me, there wasn't anybody really seriously contemplating to vote leave. There were maybe 1 or 2 people who kind of had some harebrained ideas about maybe making it easier for their cousins from India to come here if it's harder for EU citizens, or thinking about red tape from Brussels. And a couple of people that I spoke to, where I said, well, think about it. Brussels, Westminster, compare the two. Which one do you think is more corrupt? Which one's less corrupt? And which one do you want to put more faith into? So I didn't really think much of the referendum. I was in the process of establishing a business, and I thought, oh, we'll just get this silly little referendum out the way. And as soon as that's done and dusted, I'll register my business. Ha! So of course, the morning after the referendum was a huge shock. And an even bigger shock came the following year, when I kind of realized that I'm going to have to engage with this. I'm going to have to look at whether this Brexit thing is going to affect me in any way, shape or form. And I started researching, and that's roughly when I met Elena on Facebook, and we started talking. And I discovered that even though I'd been in the UK for something like 27 years at the time, I had no rights anymore to be here. I was this close to deportation. I wasn't considered to be exercising treaty rights. I wasn't considered a lawful resident. because I didn't have private health insurance while I was a stay-at-home mom, even though I'd had private health insurance for 12 years while I was a student. And had acquired the right to British citizenship, and now I can't get British citizenship anymore. That right was taken from me. I'm not considered, until the 31st of December, I wasn't considered to be of a good enough character because I didn't have comprehensive sickness insurance while I was a stay-at-home mom, and that's less than 10 years ago. So they've tweaked the rules again as of the 1st of January, but as of the 1st of January, if I naturalize, I'll lose German citizenship. And that's a red line. I'm not prepared to gamble my EU citizenship. So that's a brief introduction to myself. Just to sum up with what's happened since, of course, Brexit has completely turned my life upside down. I got involved with Elena and we published 2 books. We published this book in 12 weeks. Nobody told us it couldn't be done, so we did it. And my life was completely turned upside down. I'm doing something completely different. The business is not even on the radar anymore. It's completely gone. And I now work for a grant-funded organization helping people with their applications to the EU settlement scheme in the day job, and volunteer on top of that, helping people in the In Limbo Project. So my entire life is consumed by this now. So with that, back over to you, Graham, if you want to.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'll do a little bit of housekeeping first. If anyone wants to leave a message live, there is a Q&A option at the bottom of the screen. You should also be able to flick between 2 types of view. There should be speaker view, which will automatically go on to whoever's making any noise. And also go on, you can also pick grid view as well. So you should be able to see the 3 of us all at the same time, I hope. You can also leave a message in the chat. So I'll be monitoring the chat at the same time. And could I just ask Elena and Cosi, if you're not actually speaking, leave your mic on mute, otherwise the screen might go to you by accident if a cat comes in or something. I don't know. Anyway, so let's kick off with can you tell us a little bit more about the In Limbo project? How did it start and what was the idea behind it? And that's to Elena first.
Yes. Okay. So the In Limbo project started in March 2017. I would like to stress that it's a totally not-for-profit project. As Cosi was saying, we all work for free. And the idea behind it was to give a voice to EU citizens who hadn't had one, because most of us weren't allowed a vote in the referendum. And since the result of that referendum, we were left in a deep limbo, and our sense of home, our sense of belonging was shattered overnight. I always like to go back to the promise signed by Michael Gove, Boris Johnson and Priti Patel, a promise which said that nothing would have changed for EU citizens. And of course, it has been, nothing of the sort. As I was saying, we were left in this deep limbo, wondering what to do. So that's when the idea of gathering these voices in a book, came about, just to raise awareness of our plight. I really felt that with books, you can win many battles, and books also remain as a record of, what has happened. And for me, it was very important that both things, happen. So for this reason, I started a Facebook group. The first night we were 5. Cosi was one of the 5. She's still here. There was also Veronique Martin, who's co-editor of the book. And, after a month, we were 1,000, and we've, gone from strength to strength. We've published the book in 12 weeks, as Cosi was saying. We've also published a second book, In Limbo 2. That's the blue one. You can see Graham has the 2 books. And that comes with, it's a collaboration with a group called Grassroots Hear Our Voice, led by Debbie Williams, who will be speaking next week, but which also sees the collaboration of many other groups of Britons living in Europe, like Remain, British in Europe, and so on. So it's a pan-European endeavor. But going back to our group, the idea was that It could be a sort of safe haven, a place where people could share their often painful stories. And this is how we collected these stories, and we brought them together in the belief that when you put many voices together, they can become a much stronger collective voice. And I also felt that back then most politicians didn't really have an idea what was happening. They didn't realize the uncertainty, the limbo we were facing, and therefore it was very important to hear these voices and make them available to as wide a readership as possible, including both decision makers and members of the public alike. If Cosi, you want to say something about In Limbo, perhaps something about the group, because you'd be looking after it, so I leave it to you.
If I remember to unmute myself. Yeah, certainly the Facebook group it's a safe space. It's a place where people can talk about how they are affected at an emotional level. I think very often there are other groups that give advice, there are other fora that have lots of really good practical legal advice, but you can't really talk there about, you know what, this feels really bad. This feels like a betrayal. It feels eviscerating. You can't necessarily have that outlet, and that's where our group, I think, has been a real sanity saver. And let's not forget, we had a situation a while ago now, thankfully, where in the space of about 5 weeks we had 4 people talking about suicidal ideation. People are that desperate, or were that desperate, and really didn't know what's the way forward. So in a way, things have improved, because we know a little bit, in amongst all this uncertainty, at least we've got a few more certainties, such as the EU settlement scheme. It's a thing. We know what we have to do to apply. The application process isn't always as straightforward as the politicians would like us to believe, but for most people, for over 5 million people now, it's been possible to navigate this. And that just goes to show how grossly underestimated the number of EU citizens in the UK was, because all these people have applied. And actually, Michael said, it's a betrayal in the chat just there. And that was the word that came up the most. We made a Wordle. We asked people, and we had something like 1,500 contributions, I think, pretty much each time. And the very first time we did this, early on in the group, before we even finished collecting all the testimonies, so it must have been in March 2017, we asked people to just give us one word of how you feel about Brexit. And with a massive majority, the one word people spontaneously said was betrayed. Other feelings, of course, are fearful, uncertain. It's not a nice feeling. And we have a policy in the group that we say, whatever testimony you share, whatever you talk about in the group, we won't share it outside unless you give express permission. So if we see a testimony and think it's really well written and it really makes a good point, then we might ask the writer, would you mind if we share this somewhere? Or we might suggest it to a journalist. We get a lot of journalists asking us for stories, and they are all directed to Elena, and Elena filters them all and makes sure that they will represent us appropriately and adequately. So
yes, we try. We know it's another way of making our voices heard. The book is really if you go through it, is a very different experience from reading just an article where there's one story which is reported, and whereas the stories are in the first person, so there's no filter there. And we've tried also when Veronique and I edited the testimonies to keep them as close to the original as possible. We just maybe edited the slight typos, but we even left the original mistakes, because we felt that each individual had to have its own personal voice, and every voice is different, and every person coming from a foreign country does not write 100% perfectly. So I think it's nice to hear the variety, the voices really emerge. But in articles, of course, you bring up issues. But what Cosi was saying, I think there is a slide. I sent to Graham a few slides, and there is that Wordle, that initial Wordle. It was a piece of research done by Professor Helen de Cruz, and it was done in as I was saying, in March 2017. And we asked people how they felt, and we repeated that Wordle year after year, and I think always roughly with the same results. And yes, that's the Wordle. And the word which came up the most was betrayed. And this really helped us also to, basically put the various testimonies in the different chapters of the book. Each chapter is devoted, roughly speaking, to a feeling, although sometimes feelings, can be different. One can be sad and angry, or disappointed and feeling betrayed. But the word which came up the most was betrayed, because there was a promise and that wasn't, of course, kept. And so sad, angry, disappointed, worried, and betrayed were the feelings we used when we created the sort of narrative arc, in order to create a story within the story. Yes, so.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so what have you achieved? Do you want to go first, Cosi, on that one?
Ooh, what have we achieved? It's subtle what we've achieved. I think obviously we've worked together with the 3 million, and we're working together with lots of other groups. So it's impossible to say, oh, this particular result is as a result of what the In Limbo project did. But I think collectively, all of these grassroots organizations and all of this grassroots campaigning has achieved the Costa amendment to the withdrawal bill, which meant that on Brexit Day, we didn't suddenly plunge into this post-Brexit period, but we had our rights guaranteed regardless of whether there was a transition period or not. So there was an implementation period guaranteed. Let's not forget, for about 2 years, we were having to run on parallel tracks of, if this happens, then that happens. If we leave without a deal, the Article 50 period was extended with 4 days notice in October 2019. So things were moving incredibly fast, and it feels like walking on quicksand, and we've been doing that for 5 years now, this sense of uncertainty. So like I said, we have a bit more certainty, and we're getting a little bit more leverage here and there. And starting yesterday, the 3 million were able to give some testimonies to the House of Lords. It's subtle, it's very, very subtle, but there is that which we achieve. And of course, the mutual support. And from a really personal point of view, if I didn't have this work that I'm doing, I think I'd be going spare, because I would be able to see what's going on. I'd see the things people post on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever, and I wouldn't be able to help. And I think that would be really detrimental to my mental health. And the fact that I can do something to help people feel a little less bad about what they're having to go through here, that really does help a lot and keeps me moderately sane. I don't actually claim much sanity.
Yes. Well, I to add to what Cosi said, I think personally, as In Limbo, obviously, there are many groups. I think I hope we helped people understand the human cost of Brexit. I think, up to then, all these testimonies, I remember seeing people writing underneath articles and trying to make their voices heard, in a way or another. And I felt, what a pity if all these voices get lost. And, so it was important to collect them. It was important to have a place where people could share these things and focus on the human cost. In my opinion, that was, partly a fault of the Remain campaign. We did not hear enough of the human cost of Brexit on individuals. And I think In Limbo really focuses on the human side, on the human cost, and in the belief that people are not numbers, they're not statistics, but they're individuals with a story to share. And each story is unique. I have not found a story similar to another, although there are similarities, but because, you know, our lives are different. We come from different backgrounds. Our stories are different. We have different education. And the only things that binds us together is this sense we all belong to the same European family. And that's what we discovered as well by sharing these stories. So I hope we've contributed to that. And besides that, we published 2 books, and we've been able to bring these stories around, to marches, to webinars now, to the European Parliament, French Senate, and again, bring our stories to different newspapers. And now the book has been translated into Czech just before the end of the transition period, and it's in the process of being translated into Italian and hopefully other languages, because I think a book like this is needed not only in Britain, is needed in Europe to start a discussion around what it is being European, what's a European identity. But also, and finally, I really hope that the book is, and I know, from testimonies we received, has helped people realize, that in some cases, they voted, people, for instance, who voted leave, the impact this has had on people's lives. And many have said, I would never do it again. Of course, you may think, well, Brexit has happened, but it doesn't matter. It's educating the public and in understanding more about EU citizens, immigrations in general, and so we hope we've done a little bit of that.
I'm going to jump in there and add something to what you just said there, Elena. So, where was the conversation about the human cost of Brexit during the Remain campaign? Nowhere, of course, because the promise was nothing would change, and there was no reason for anything to change. Legally speaking, there was no reason for anything to change, because those laws that apply to us, those rights that we've acquired, well, it's a violation of human rights to take them away from us. And that's what's happened. Our rights have been taken away from us. The UK has violated human rights, and nobody bats an eyelid. And that was impossible to predict. So I'm not that angry with the Remain campaign for not predicting that and for not seeing that coming. Although I think during the Article 50 period, when we were campaigning for a people's vote, when we were campaigning to try and sort of steer this around somehow, that's when that became apparent. And we do know, I know 2 people who are very ardent Remainers now and very involved with the Yellow Rose Project, who voted leave and changed their mind because of our books. Of course, Elena, do you remember that phone conversation we had when we started collecting testimonies? We were speaking to each other like first thing in the morning. I saw you posting on Facebook at 6 a.m. and again at 2 a.m. I'm like, when does this woman ever sleep? And then we were on the phone in the morning talking about the people we'd invited, where we shared it and so on. And then Article 50 was triggered, slap bam in the middle of all of this. And we went, so what now? It's a done deal. You can't take Article 50 back. Can you take it back? Does anybody know? Has anybody actually read the Lisbon Treaty? And, what do we do? Do we carry on? Do we still publish this book when it's completely pointless? 5 minutes later, the next thing was a snap election. And we again went, well, what if Labour win and it's all different? Is there any point? And we decided that, yes, there is a point, because these stories, these testimonies, they are Zeitzeugnisse, they're testimonies of the time. Can you imagine having diary entries? Look at the diary of Anne Frank. As boring and mundane as a diary of a 12-year-old is, it is a vitally important piece of literature for world heritage, to have those real stories, real voices, people's real lives with the boring stuff left in. And that's why I think we decided to go ahead, because we said, well, even if this ends tomorrow, it's a testimony of the last 9 months. Well, that 9 months has turned into 5 years, and it's probably going to be a couple of decades still. So yeah, I just wanted to add that to what we've achieved and what we've done.
Yes.
And we've got loads of questions in the Q&A as well. I think.
I don't know if we're going to get through all this before midnight.
The human cost, I meant the human cost in general. You know, even for Britons mainly. I wasn't thinking of EU citizens necessarily. Yes. Sorry, Graham.
I always found that when we talk about sort of trade deals and the economy, people are just left cold. But when you talk about actual personal stories and people that you know whose lives have been impacted by this, families that have been ripped apart, livelihoods, you know, torn up, that's what gets through to people more than just saying, oh, the economy is going to go down by X percent. So yeah, I think that's why In Limbo and In Limbo 2 are so important. So you kind of answered a little bit of this in the last answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and I'll start with Elena. How has life changed for EU citizens since the referendum?
Well, it's been completely turned upside down. I mean, you know, we started from, you know, we were ordinary citizens who, until that dreadful, I like always to underline that, referendum campaign, because it was truly dreadful, we, you know, we felt integrated. We were paying taxes, you know, we were the neighbors, and, you know, we felt we were part of you know, of the country we considered home. And all of a sudden, you know, this campaign that started depicting us as the other, as the enemy. And, you know, and that was painful. And then there were terms such as, you know, bargaining chips. You know, we became pawns for the government, you know, in order to get this better deal. And then Theresa May called us queue jumpers. I always think that's a very powerful image, you know, in a country where you queue up for everything. And for me, the nail in the coffin was when Boris Johnson said that we had overstayed our welcome. We had considered this place our home for too long. And so I would say that the place we called home, all of a sudden we felt had become more hostile. You know, many of us felt like third-class citizens, like unwelcome guests. And in that I have to blame also the newspapers, you know, the language used by newspapers and by some politicians, of course I'm not speaking of everybody, in trying to depict us as a sort of depersonalized mass of migrants, as economic migrants. I mean, there's nothing wrong in the word migrant, you know, we are migrants when we move from one place to the other, but until then we were citizens because we also have the right to vote. And therefore, you know, there was this idea that we were here to weigh on structures, to steal jobs, you know, and if you look at the headlines, particularly of tabloids, it was a constant, you know, day after day. I don't know, Graham, if you might have that slide, but day after day, we had these headlines, and they did hurt. And they created a sort of false narrative. So In Limbo really wanted to you know, create a sort of counter narrative in this discourse by, as I was saying before, creating in the group in particular a sort of haven of tranquility, a place where people could finally feel you know, human beings and not these migrants who grab our jobs, as this headline says, you know, in the slide. So yes, that's fundamentally what changed for us, particularly at the beginning.
Okay, Cosi, do you want to come in on that?
There's so much more that could be said. I'm kind of conscious, though, of the Q&A questions that have been posed, and there's loads there, and I think
we could be here all night.
that I want to address. So,
well, do you want to talk a little bit about how your life has changed since the referendum?
Oh, it's
as an EU
unrecognizable. I mean, I never would have imagined that I would work where I'm now working, in the job that I'm now doing. I have a health condition which meant that I didn't expect, I never thought I'd be working full time. That's why I was building up my own business, so that I would be able to fit it around my family and my health condition. I took this job 2 years ago on a 9-month contract, thinking it's only 9 months. It's only 9 months. That was 2 years ago. My contract has been extended and extended. And in fact, I've just taken another post within the same organization, moving away from the USS project that I've built up and leaving that in the hands of an absolutely amazing team. So it's so fundamentally different, but also it's really changed how I view people around me. So it's stopped me being as outgoing as I was. Obviously, Graham, we met at I think it was a Worldwide Wednesday or something like that, and we're two very similar people. We'll just make friends with anybody in the room instantly, and talk, and have lots and lots and lots of different things to say. I stopped being so outgoing. I became very, very fearful of going out to places where I wouldn't be surrounded by Remainers. I remember 2 years ago, my husband took us up to Scotland to a festival, and I was on the brink of not going. And both he and our best friend up in Scotland will basically turn around. Well, will you stop being stupid? You're coming to Scotland. You're not going to meet any leavers here. And that's a really, really fundamental thing, it affects people deeply. And I'm very lucky. I'm in a Remain area, I have lots of international friends. I mean, Liverpool is, I think, the most welcoming city in the world. New York might compare, but Liverpool has actually a council that has made an official statement to declare this city to be a city of refuge, where people can come and be welcomed and rebuild their lives. We have a council-funded project called the Our Liverpool Project that has its purpose to help migrants overcome barriers to living here. To making this our home. When the Liverpool Council, or the mayor I should say, wrote a letter to every single EU citizen registered on the electoral register, highlighting the importance of our European links, going right back to the Scandinavian sailors that came 1,000 years ago, to the German meat butchers that founded the German church in 1815, and calling us European Scousers. So I'm in a place where I'm, made to feel very welcome, and people really, really feel you should move to Liverpool. It's a great place to be. If people go out of their way, and if anybody you meet, go back 2 generations, they're from somewhere else. And yet, even here, it's changed things so fundamentally for me. I dread to think what it's like for people who live in places that voted leave. I wouldn't want to be there. I'd be really, really scared actually to travel to certain places right now. So I think that's the most fundamental change, and that is not something that is easily remedied either. Likewise, I mean, there was a question in the Q&A about people being detained when they come here. I have 3 nieces in Germany and 3 nephews as well, and I would not recommend any of them traveling to visit us right now for a visit. And I don't know when that will change.
That's so heartbreaking.
I have to say that, unlike Cosi, I come from a very different area. It's not an area that voted leave, but it's an area where, that started voting Remain, but it's Theresa May's constituency. So, I don't really have to explain much. But I think that for EU citizens, she's right, a lot has changed, and our sense of home and belonging has really been, challenged. I think that home is not only the place where you come from, but it's also the place, that you adopt as your home. And for me, Britain was my home. Now, sometimes I no longer know. I feel that Brexit, I remember what Ian Dunn said when, he wrote the introduction to the second edition of In Limbo, by the way, which has come out only a few months ago. And he said that with Brexit, a sort of barrier came down, and we are people sometimes of multiple loyalties. I mean, I can be Milanese because I'm from Milan, and I can be Lombard because that's my region, and I can be Italian, and I'm a European and I'm British, and and these multiple loyalties can coexist. I'm a daughter of Europe, and I'm a proud citizen of the world. And with Brexit, we were made to choose. And I think that did not only happen to EU citizens, it happened to British citizens as well. I've seen the pain, I've read all these testimonies, and I wept with them. But, for us, this sense of insecurity, of being devalued fundamentally, of no longer feeling welcome in many in many places has really played a key part, and this is something that will take time to heal, and this is why it's important to talk about this, because I think we need to work together to reestablish that trust at least amongst people who are sensitive to these issues.
Okay, thank you. And also, I'd like to back Cosi's words up about Liverpool being the greatest place in the world. Just change my background to Liverpool.
Possibly.
Greatest city in the world. Take it from me. I've been to enough of them. Right, so moving swiftly on, we're going to talk about the books for a moment. So just give us a little quick rundown about what the books are about, and more importantly, what are the main themes in them? And can we start with Elena?
Well, yes, I think we've partially already answered that question. I mean, we have In Limbo, which is, it's a collection of these personal accounts from EU citizens, which, describe the practical, emotional turmoil EU citizens have in the UK have experienced since the referendum. As I was saying, that the so-called 3 million have been often treated in the British political discourse as a depersonalized mass of migrants. But in the books, you will find them describing themselves as citizens until the moment, when rules all of a sudden were changed. And we were left, let's never forget, for months in this limbo, not having an idea of what would happen. In the new edition, we added a chapter called Unsettled Status, because things had changed and moved from 2017, and we wanted to add experiences of difficulties in obtaining settled status. Again, people feel very much in limbo, and perhaps we can elaborate more on settled status afterwards. But again, the focus of the book is feeling. So that's why we call the chapter Unsettled. We didn't say settled status or Windrush application or so. So again, it's a book which collects his voices, and here you see some, and some of, I remember Olof saying, "From today, I'm a piece of bargaining fodder, not a place, not a person made of flesh and bone, not a life entrenched in the tapestry of this country for over 32 years. And then Mariano says, "I, citizen of Europe, my wings clipped, my dreams shattered. I feel rather lost, I no longer belong." Or Ellie comments, "I have not had a good night's sleep since the referendum," because like many EU citizens, she really, really struggled to get her PR, then had to convert it into settled status, then they changed her name, and then the photograph was gone, and and she found, she went through a real Calvary. And then there's the last sentence of all those who've decided to leave. I always like to remember Peer from Bavaria, Cosi knows her very well, who, in a sentence really expressed the feeling. She said, "So long, Britain, you were once good to me, and then you were not." So these are examples of the painful stories we have. And of course, there's a second book about instead stories of UK citizens living in Europe. But I'd like to stress that both books contain stories also of UK citizens in the UK, sometimes married to EU citizens, or in the other book, people who left, because, the book is about feeling in limbo, and that's for everybody. We never really, In Limbo has never been a group just of EU citizens. We didn't want to become a sort of ghetto. It's just us, talking about our issues. But we wanted to open up to anybody who had something to share.
Amazing. Cosi, you got anything to add to that, or should we crack on?
I was trying to see if the questions marry up to what Elena was talking about there, but no, I think, and you've summarized it, what both books are about, really, and the fact that they are about all of us and that feeling of being in limbo. And, you know, we have in Limbo 2, we have a testimony that I read the other day at the launch by somebody who's now living in Romania with her Romanian husband, but she's writing about what happened to her in the UK as a British citizen married to a Romanian, and the actually xenophobic abuse they experienced. So it isn't to differentiate, and that's exactly the point. We're trying to counteract the othering that's happening, that's going on in the world actually quite a lot at the moment. I'm just going to take the initiative and dive into these questions because I just saw the time, and there was one from Emanuela which I alluded to before about the detention of EU citizens coming into the UK with settled status or dual British EU passports. Will that carry on? Will it become easier to travel? I think at the moment there are, these are mistakes, obviously. The border guards jurisdiction ends the minute that they have established that you're a British citizen. So this is a bit daft that this has happened. I think that things will become better and smoother as they get used to it. So I think there is an element of teething problems. But that said, at the moment, the Home Office has issued guidance to the border guards that EU citizens should not be detained. They should be released on detention bail. Because of COVID, because they were put in detention centres because there weren't enough flights to put them on the flight the same day. That is only while the pandemic is going on. So the minute COVID is no longer an issue, that could be resumed, that could happen again. And it's, you know, it is those cases where people, I mean, obviously the ones who have settled status, who have British citizenship, that's relatively easy to evidence. But what about those who are coming as students or who are coming to apply for to come specifically to a pre-arranged job interview? And that is something you are allowed to do on a visitor visa. So they're not intending to break the rules of the visitor visa, and yet the border guards are assuming that that's what they're trying to do. So I think that there will be problems again in answer to that question.
I agree with Cosi. I mean, going back to that, you know, those those citizens held at the border. Of course, there are rules that these people came, you know, not knowing certain things, but in my opinion, it was totally disproportionate. And I think in terms of us, you know, you citizens who have come here before, I think it gives us a taste of what the hostile environment looks like. And, you know, these people being handcuffed and people refuse medication, everything. I mean, this is what happened to and happens to non-EU nationals. So I think that, you know, created, I've never seen people more worried than in the past couple of weeks when we had these things happening. And those letters sent by the Home Office, I think they were meant just to inform people, but it's the language, you know, when you say, you know, your rights will be taken for you, you know, people get, you know, panic. And particularly if you're talking of dual nationals who received this letter, and I've received today a message, you know, by somebody saying, I've received this letter, what do I do? I already have my settled status. So of course there's a lot of tension, and it all stems from, you know, this lack of trust, which has grown in the years. And why should we trust a government which has not maintained its promises? So, you know, yes, that's all I wanted to add to what Cosi said.
Okay, thanks for that. So I'm going to ask a few questions about settled status, and then we'll dive into the questions that we've got coming up tonight. Yes. Is that okay? Yeah?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So first of all, let's just give an overview. What is settled status and why do people need to apply?
Well, settled status, in order for EU citizens to remain in this country, we were forced to apply, not register, for settled status. Settled status is a digital only status. That means that we do not have any physical proof of settled status, and therefore, whenever we need to rent, we want to, for instance, go to a bank and open an account or a mortgage and everything. It's up to these people to check, because there's no physical proof. There's nothing we can bring there. Except that we need to show we need to have basically access to internet. We need to make sure that the other person on the other side has access to internet. We need to access the government website, which is not always on. We've had cases when it was off for 24 hours or more. Let's say, just to keep it brief, it's a multi-step process. It's not as easy as Monique Hawkins yesterday was explaining it very well. It's not like having your phone and your boarding pass that you can show. And at the moment we are in the grace period, which means that up to the 30th of June, nobody should be asking for settled status. But there's a but. There's a lot of ignorance, let's say, and not everybody is, it needs to be knowledgeable. And we've had cases of people who've been asked settled status at airline desks. I've had 3 testimonies in a day of people who've been asked by their hospitals. One discovered on the day that she had terminal cancer, and she was asked to prove whether she was entitled to treatment. And same happened with people renting. Landlords are very confused, and they really find it really odd to have this code and to have to do, and therefore they've asked a letter from the Home Office, which of course doesn't exist. So all this has already started creating discrimination. But we have particular categories who are at risk, and all the vulnerable people, the elderly, the children in particular, the minorities such as the Roma community, for instance, or victims of domestic abuse. I'm sure then Cosi can elaborate more on these. These are all people at great risk of not applying on time. And there are various other issues linked to settled status, but perhaps not just to carry on forever. I'd like Cosi maybe to interject, and then maybe I'll carry on saying what are some of the issues that we are experiencing with settled status. Cosi, to you.
Don't get me started. We'll be here forever if I start talking about the issues that people are finding. So yes, of course, the grant-funded organizations, of which there are 72, on top of that, there is settled. On top of that, many cities, city councils are funding projects to help EU citizens with applications. The Scottish government is funding Citizens Advice Scotland. So all over Scotland, in all of Scotland, there is help available with the EU settlement scheme. And no question asked, so there's no requirement to have particular vulnerabilities. With the grant funding from the Home Office, they're supposed to be targeting specific vulnerable groups, but actually the Home Office has pretty much kind of gone, yeah, whatever, you do what you need to do. Help first, ask questions later kind of mentality. And that's good, and that's how it should be. Because if you are experiencing a problem with making the application, then it doesn't matter whether you're a member of the Roma community or you have a disability or you're elderly. You are vulnerable of the hostile environment, even if you are digitally literate and in a job and of the working age and not Roma. And, if you're experiencing a problem with the application for whatever reason, then, you might need some help. There was a question earlier on, and I can't find it anymore now, vaguely relating to this, but I can't think of it now. So I'm sorry if I can't find it. I think we should go through these one at a time, maybe. But some of the grant-funded organizations are now also organizing information sessions. So the ADAS, the Association for Directors of Adult Social Services, they're doing a whole series of sessions, obviously primarily aimed at social services, social departments or social services of local councils have a statutory obligation to make the applications for children in care. You try making an application for a child in care. They don't necessarily have a passport. They can't necessarily get a passport because, for example, Romanian nationality law doesn't recognize court orders made by courts in other countries where children were taken from their natural parents and placed in care. Traditionally, actually, in England, Scotland and Wales, councils, social services don't keep nationality data of children in care. So they've had to sit down and try and figure out which of these children are actually not British. In Northern Ireland, ironically, thanks to the Good Friday Agreement and children having the right to both Irish and British nationality, they do keep that data. So they've got an easy ride in comparison. I know that Liverpool Social Services have worked extremely hard to identify all these children. They have had to go to court to get best interest decisions to sway the embassies to make passports for children when a parent was absent. You know, sometimes a parent might be abroad in another country, you can't get them here. And that's if they're with the parents. If they're in care, then the relationship with the parents might have broken down. These children are receiving help, but there is a real chance of some of them falling through the net and waking up on their 18th birthday as care leavers and being classed as illegal immigrants with everything the hostile environment has to offer. No way of proving their rights. Now, the Home Office has said that they will accept late applications, but if a child is, I don't know, 2 years old now, they'll be 18 in 16 years' time. I don't know whether the Home Office will accept a late application after 16 years. And also, that person will then be considered to have been in violation of immigration rules for that long, you know. So late applications are not necessarily the answer. Citizens Advice Liverpool have had a lot of reports of people being asked for status already by employers, and they're working together with Migrants at Work and Work Rights Centre to organise information sessions. There's about 10 sessions coming up over the next 3 to 4 months, particularly targeting employers. There was one also this morning together with the Home Office to teach employers about the points-based system and about what they have to do for right to work checks, which until the 30th of June is nothing other than the EU passport. Only from the 1st of July onwards are they supposed to check for status under the EU settlement scheme, and then only for new recruits that they're hiring, new employees, not existing ones. So there's a lot of confusion, and there are a lot of organizations working very hard to counter that. But that said, you know, there was somebody who asked earlier about how many people might fall through the net. Like I say, we're working very hard to keep that number as low as possible, but I heard an estimate the other day of 130,000.
Oh, wow. So, yes. So does this risk a whole new Windrush, basically? Is that the worry here?
On steroids with knobs on.
Okay. God.
Absolutely, because you know, there's really the risk of so many people falling through the net. And just to give you a few examples, you know, for instance, a lot of people have received pre-settled status in, you know, in some cases because they haven't been in the country for 5 years, in others because they didn't have enough documents to prove, you know, that, you know, they had been here. I think, for instance, some victims of domestic abuse have very, you know, few documents, and many people are unaware that they need to reapply, you know, comes 5 years, and you know, you wonder, you know, what will happen. Well, what happens if you don't reapply is that, you know, you become illegal, and again you got, you know, to leave the country and re-enter, you know, as you know, with a visa or whatever. Imagine, lots of vulnerable people, may forget, may not know. Some people do not know that they need, they cannot leave the country for more than 2 years. And there's another rule: you cannot leave the country for more than 180 days in any 12-month period. So it's very complicated. And another thing is, whenever you have settled status, I always like to call it like a long life. You establish a long life relationship with the Home Office. You need to update your data continuously because it's linked to your passport, it's linked to your email, it's linked to your address. Are people going to remember that for a long time? And, if you don't do that, it's going to create problems. It may not work. It may lead to mistakes that have all slowly led people to, the Windsor scandal that, we are aware of. And during the pandemic also, a lot of people have had issues renewing their passports. We've had a tweet the other day. This person is still waiting for the new passport and therefore he can't apply for settled status. What's going to happen? Of course, they said they will be generous and everything, but it's not that we have the exact details. And how long will it take? Some people haven't had, been able to have these face-to-face meetings. So there is a delay, and that's why extending the deadline is a good idea, but it's not going to solve the problem. The problem is at the root, is that settled status, has a lot of, flaws and issues which could lead to problems similar to that of the, the Windrush experience. The only issue is that we are, 5 million people. I think we're no longer the 3 million, but we are more than that. We found out. And I was, last night, I was listening to Monique Hawkins, and she gave a very good example. She said that any scheme that works, let's say the very most successful one we had in the UK was when we moved from the TV from analog to digital. And it was highly successful. 97% of people applied within, the right time. But 3% were left out. And what is 3% of 5 million people? We could, as Cosi was saying, that could lead to having 150,000 people becoming illegal overnight. And becoming illegal means to be cut off from every service. You can't rent, you can't have a job, so you basically cannot live in a country. And therefore there is great concern, and no wonder people are worried and anxious when mistakes arise, when a settled status is issued in their maiden name, but every document maybe they have because they're married to a Brit is in their married name. And people are worried when their picture disappeared, like Ellie. She had this picture on the on her settled status, and the day after another picture appears from her previous PR, and some people log in and they say, oh, your status, they don't seem to see the status anymore, and not having a physical proof adds to this anxiety. And but so far we haven't been able to convince the Home Office of the need, at least for the most vulnerable ones, but I would say for anyone, to have, as an extra, something to be able to show and to hold on to if anything goes wrong.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's important, I think, that we keep up this campaign for a physical status, but the direction of travel and the trajectory of the Home Office is that all immigration statuses will be made to be digital ones. So we are fighting against again, we're swimming against the stream. We're fighting against the direction of travel, but I think it's very important to register our protest, to show that this is what's necessary. This is what we need. We need a physical status. We need a physical proof. It's great to have the digital status as well, but this is just, to have a backup. The letter telling you that you've received settled status tells you this letter is not proof. I mean, really, did you have to put it in bold in the letter? Was that really necessary? And yet a lot of places accept those letters as proof, such as landlords and employers. So, what was the point in doing that? There was somebody who asked about whether you're given a reference number. Yes, we are given reference numbers. I did threaten to tattoo it on my arm. But actually that reference number, once your status is granted, doesn't mean anything anymore. So that's just an application number. Your status is connected not to that number, which would stay the same, but it's connected to your passport number. So every time you change your passport, you have to remember to go on the website and update it. And actually, until very recently, people had to send their brand spanking new passports in the post, which I'm sorry, that is completely and utterly unacceptable. In many countries, it's illegal to send passports in the post. Until very recently, my German passport said in it, this passport is the property of the Federal Republic of Germany. You do not give it to anybody else, because that carries a penalty of up to 10 years in jail. You know, you just don't. So this is something that the Home Office needs to consider and bear in mind. And I think that's something that's typical of not just the Home Office actually, but the UK. So there was a question there about, you know, does the rest of Europe laugh at the UK or does it cry? Well, let me tell you, on the 26th of October 2019, when the Article 50 period was extended, I was in Germany. I was sitting in my brother's living room watching the news with my brother and my sister-in-law. And they both, when that was announced, turned around and went, oh no. Their attitude at the time was just go. You want to go, go. Well, I felt very much stabbed in the dark, but at the same time, I can understand it, because Brexit has sucked the air out of all political debate in the EU. And they're at the point where they just think, you know what, we just want to get on with it. You guys, you want to go, go already. And we've gone, and still the UK is not happy and still blaming the EU. So there you go. And I think that taps right in with this question about, you know, how do you feel we reignite a passion for and understanding of the European project, and what part do you feel that EU citizens who have settled here can play in that? I think we are playing that part. I don't think we can play anymore. And, you know, you see this white hoodie that I'm wearing right now. These hoodies were made for that march in London when there were 2 million of us, not the 1 million march, the bigger one later on. I can't remember which march was on which date because we've been to so many. And the idea was that all the EU citizens would all march together wearing these white hoodies. We were going to be a white bloc. Well, that completely fell flat on its face and didn't happen. But in amongst all the different organizations, all the different groups marching, whether that was Leeds for Europe, Liverpool for Europe, Lancashire for Europe, Yorkshire for Europe, you know, whatever group you looked at, here and there were little white coats, little white jacket, embedded in the crowd, embedded in that flow of people, in the same way as we are embedded in our communities. We're part and parcel of them. We're not one European citizens community. We're part of the Liverpool community, the London community, where we live. I think that's something that really has to be borne in mind and remembered. And that goes actually with Andra's question. Andra Maciuka is asking questions, and I think we should say thank you to her, don't you think, Elena?
Absolutely. Been covering, you know, our stories, and you know, always very open to cover any problems, you know, citizens have had. So, you know, a big thank you indeed. I just wanted to add something about the risk going back to settled status. Another issue is the fact that we have a big backlog. I mean, more than 300,000, you know, people still haven't received settled status. And particularly non-EU citizens married to EU citizens seems to be at the back of the queue. And it's estimated that 6,000 of them have waited more than a year. And in the book there are I think 2 testimonies from husbands and wives of non-EU citizens. So that's another worry. And, you know, so that, you know, it's just to give you an idea of when we, you know, put together this chapter called Unsettled Status, we are still deeply unsettled. And that's why, you know, we supported all the Remain campaign, we've been there, but, you know, we also need your support. We need you to help us raise awareness, you know, that things are not fine. And, you know, we cannot bury our heads in the sand and saying it's fine. And as EU citizens, I think, you know, we we want to keep having a voice, and the way of having a voice is really sharing the stories. But as for the British public, we need you to help us sharing them and support us and sympathize with all these issues, which are part of the wider discourse on European identity. I remember Richard Hale wrote a short testimony, UK citizen, and said, "Leave a light on for us." And we would very much like to leave a light on for British citizens, but we need you to support us, and not to forget that we were part of. We brought so much also to this country. We love this country. Most of us came here for love. It's not only work, or maybe we came for work and we fell in love with it. So we still would like very much to play an integral part and bring our talents, which is not just money, it's not just job. Even a mother looking after children, looking after disabled children, looking after elderly UK, maybe in-laws, is doing an important job. And then we brought talent and we brought variety. And so, again, we would like to carry on being that, playing that part, as I was saying, playing that role.
Thank you. Can we just go on to a couple of the messages, the questions that have been asked tonight? There's one from Andra, which I think you've already seen, is from the London Economic.
Yeah.
Is CSI still a citizen requirement, and is it fair given it is a retrospective requirement? And shouldn't EU citizens have the same rights as Brits while in the EU, including free healthcare access? So Elena first.
Cosi, would you like to, it's more of a technical...
I was just going to say, who's going to take this one, you or me?
Cosi, go for it.
Things about it as well. So CSI is still looked for as part of naturalization. So
sorry, can I just ask Cosi, what is CSI? Okay. I thought it was a TV show.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Comprehensive sickness insurance. So this goes back to the EU Directive 2004/38, which came into force in 2006. Now, the basic principle of this directive is that if you're an EU citizen from one country in the EU residing in another EU country, then you should have some form of health cover so that if you become ill, you don't become a burden to the state. Now, if you're working and paying tax, then you will be paying taxes and your health insurance is covered through your income tax. Or most, in fact, all of the other EU countries have an insurance-based healthcare system. It's not private insurance, actually. In Germany, only 20% of people have private insurance. 80% of the insurances are state insurances. So a percentage of your pay goes towards your health insurance, and your employer pays another little percentage. And what company you're insured through and what type of insurance you have, and actually to some extent the kind of services you get, the bells and whistles you get with your insurance, that is dependent on who you're employed with. So, for example, when I was growing up, my dad was a doctor, and actually postal workers had the best private insurance, believe it or not. Civil servants, best insurance ever. They got special waiting rooms with fresh flower arrangements and better magazines than the rest. But the doctor was the same. So there you go. You'd hope that the actual clinical information is the same. So that's the basic principle of comprehensive sickness insurance. Now, if you are not working, if you're considered to be self-sufficient, then you have to have a separate insurance. So if you're a student, for example, now when I was a student, I was insured with my dad's policy until the year 2000. For 12 years, the first 12 years of living in the UK, I still had insurance in Germany. But of course, that's more than 20 years ago. It's impossible to find proof of that. Then the other people who are under this requirement are typically stay-at-home moms. Stay-at-home moms, although they're actually dependent on their spouses who are paying income tax and contributing to the NHS, they're taken out of that, and it hits stay-at-home. It hits women more because more women are the stay-at-home parents, So there is a feminist issue. Patriarchy has a lot to answer for here as well. And it is disproportionately affecting women and stay-at-home moms. So what happens with the CSI requirement is that in the past, you had to show proof of your comprehensive sickness insurance to get the permanent residence card. For settled status, they've taken this out of the process. So it's only residents now. You don't have to prove that you were lawfully resident. So there's this distinction between resident and lawfully resident. And I remember, Graham, the first time I told you this, you were like, wait a minute. It doesn't lawfully mean that you don't break any criminal laws, that you don't commit any crimes. Like, no, it's much more fundamental and basic than that. So you can be unlawfully resident just by not having the right kind of insurance that nobody tells you about and nobody knows about. So, you know, when you register your business with HMRC, they don't tell you about that. Or when, you know, there's no place where you get told about this in your journey as an EU citizen living in the UK. So a lot of people fall foul of this. Now, for getting settled status under the EU settlement scheme, it's currently not being checked, but it is actually still in the withdrawal agreement. So it could be that in the future, the Home Office decides, well, actually, you know what, we're going to bring it back. We're going to check again. But at the moment, it's not. So you can get your settled status and then apply for citizenship. But as part of the citizenship application, they don't check, they check for lawful residence in the context of the good character requirement. And that means that you must not have been in violation of any immigration rules for the past 10 years. So because of that, and because I was a stay-at-home mom until 2019, when I got settled status and therefore became free of immigration rules, I won't be able to naturalize until 2029. Now, they've changed the rules again. So this was brought back in May 2020. So from the 15th of May 2020, anybody who naturalized was asked for comprehensive sickness insurance going back 10 years. Then the Home Office kind of realized, well, actually, this is maybe a bit unfair because people might have gotten settled status, but not just based on the last 5 years. They might have been here for years before. So now, since the 1st of January, the Home Office allows that you might have been free from immigration control more than 5 years ago, or more than 10 years ago, even, in which case it becomes irrelevant. Does that make sense? Does that explain it?
I think so.
It did, because it is complex and it's complicated. And is it fair? No, it is absolutely not fair. It's completely ridiculous that that any kind of rule is applied retroactively. In fact, in most countries in the world, ex post facto laws, that's laws that act retroactively, are illegal. In most countries, they're explicitly legislated against in constitutions. But what with the UK not having a written constitution, they're just considered, what's the word? Oh yeah, on Wikipedia, it says they're frowned upon in UK law, because that's a hard and fast legal term for you.
And that's what led to Windrush, because the Windrush people found that rules had changed retrospectively, and they found that they didn't have the right documents. I just wanted to add that the first part of In Limbo contains several examples of people who had issues with CSI when it was still a requisite in order to get, at the time we had so-called PR, permanent residency. And speaking of PR, I would like to say, if any of you has got permanent residency, you need to change it into settled status. It's extremely important, because a lot of people think they see permanent residency, you got indefinite leave to remain, and you can be led into thinking that that's forever. No, unfortunately, you need to apply for settled status. So I would like to make that clear, because we could have somebody, and if any even British listener has some links with EU citizens, please do ask them, have you applied for settled status? Have your children applied for settled status? Because lots of children are going to miss out. If you've got permanent residency, have you applied for settled status? Because it's extremely important. And, we cannot stress that enough, I think, because we have how many, 22 days to go?
20 days as of tomorrow. So 20 working days until the deadline on the 30th of June. And that's what I was just going to say. The deadline is on the 30th of June. Yeah, let's plug that and push that. And it's 20 days, 20 working days, including, you know, tomorrow onwards. The permanent residence card was issued under EEA rules. Those rules no longer apply. So that's why people have to change from PR card to EU settled status or EU settlement scheme.
Thank you. I'm going to have to say sorry to a lot of the people who have been dropping questions in. We've only got 12 minutes left, believe it or not. Yeah, I'll just drop into a couple of the questions if you can just give a pretty short answer to this. Martin has asked, children of EU and EEA members have a way of getting British citizenship without the need of getting settled status first. Can you explain the process and where to turn to for help?
Cosi, you'd like to speak?
Yeah, I guess I'll do that one. Okay, Martin. So there's two ways, well, three. So once a parent has acquired settled status, then any child born in the UK can register for British citizenship as long as they're not 18 yet. That costs £1,000. Any children who are born after an EU citizen or after anybody gets settled status or indefinite leave to remain, they are automatically British, and all you have to do is apply for a British passport. There is a sting in the tail though. At that point, when you apply for the first passport, you have to show that you are that you have been exercising treaty rights for 5 years. Now, with 5 P60s, that's easy. But if you haven't been working for all of those 5 years, then that might be difficult. And it has happened in the past that children were given a British passport. And then after 5 years, when that first passport expired, they went to renew their passport. And every time the passport is renewed, that is tested again, whether they are really definitely eligible for British citizenship. And at that point, some people were not given the passport because the parents had not been registered with the worker scheme, with the EU worker scheme for citizens from Eastern European countries. So that can have a sting in the tail. So for advice on that, I would recommend going to Citizens Advice. There's another organization, the name of which escapes me right now. It's something about British citizenship for children or something like that. It's very much labeled, does what it says on the tin what it does, but I can't think of the exact name now. I hope that answers that question.
Thanks. We've got there's a question here from Helen Grogan, and she's asked, and I think this touched on a thing that you could elaborate on just in general. Amelia Gentleman has highlighted today. I wish my screen would stop updating without me asking it to. We have heard in the news. Oh, hang on.
I've got
Amelia
it.
Gentleman has highlighted today that EU citizens who haven't applied for settled status by the end of June will be denied free NHS care and may have their employment terminated. Can we help with this? And I'd like to elaborate that. What can we do as British citizens to help our EU brethren and sisters out in this situation?
I missed the question because I was trying to find it. Can you reread it if you mind?
EU citizens who haven't applied for settled status by the end of June will be denied free NHS care and may have their employment terminated. Can we help with this? Well, first of all, that would be illegal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You can't terminate somebody's employment because they haven't got an immigration status. Employers only check immigration status or right to work at the time when they employ somebody. So they don't have to check for existing employees. In terms of NHS care, they are asking for proof. Now there is a difference. Primary care, Ellen, I don't know if you know more about this, but primary care is supposed to continue. Regardless, there's no checking for status. It's only supposed to be secondary care. So for example, a physio referral, they would check for status, not for A&E.
Are they talking about late applications? Because
they're talking about people who haven't applied under the EU settlement scheme by the end of June. I should say, obviously, anybody who's got
but of
eligible
course,
for the...
I mean, here we are not lawyers, so I mean, we don't want to enter too much into the legalities of. I think that for late applications, until you don't receive your status, you are liable to be charged by the NHS. You have no right to rent, and that was, what was said.
You have got the certificate of application. So if you, as long as you make your application before the 30th of June, you'll have a certificate of application, and that evidences your rights until the application.
It's just a certificate. I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's not, so.
Not great.
Evidence given last night in front of the Lords. I read that was not, I mean, you still don't have right to rent and to work. That doesn't mean that your work would be terminated. That I don't know. It's a very serious situation, but there's not much we can do in the sense that we can only push and we can only make people, more and more people aware, the public aware of these issues. But as individuals, this is something, that is, is beyond our scope, particularly as an In Limbo group. But certainly what we can do is just to keep the attention high on these issues so that it does not, I mean, what happened to the Windrush people is that there was total silence around, what was happening to them. As EU citizen, I think we have, we found one another, and it's extremely important. And, we are achieving results. If you think today of the immigration exemption to the data protection bill, there was a success. We were, the 3 million, and I think it was Open Rights groups, they won the appeal, and that means that the Home Office cannot prevent us from knowing what happened if something goes wrong with your application, that it cannot withhold information. So, I mean, there are, achievements, but, we need legal battles. But, it's important that, we find that unity to be able to fight. And, and one thing this experience has taught me is that we should never take for granted our rights. It's always a battle. It's always a battle, and that's why it's important that we stick together and we don't think that everything is sorted.
Okay, quick question from Vera, asking, is it possible now to renew your EU settled status electronically when your passport expires? Do we have any information on this? Cosi?
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
yeah. You no longer have to send it in the post.
Okay, and something that's close to my heart, because my dad suffers from dementia, and I'd worry. I've got a friend whose dad came from Poland. He passed away last year, but he would have been in real trouble trying to get citizenship, settled status, because he had advanced dementia. So Jane wants to know, are the elderly charities aware? Seems to me that people with dementia will need support for forevermore on settled status.
Of course, all the vulnerable categories need support, and and there are organizations trying to help them. Of course, we have even in the book a testimony from somebody whose father was suffering from Alzheimer, I think. And the person herself was suffering from mental issues. And this is what people often forget. They think of EU citizens sometimes as a sort of a group, of people who are, in health and able to use the computer and whereas, sometimes many of them have health issues, mental health issues. And so this lady was describing the turmoil, the difficulties in reaching the care home and trying to make people, realize that her father, because he had been here for a long time. And that's another group of people, they often, because they've been here a long time, they don't think, they need to apply. Besides, settled status, there's always the Windrush application. Many people are not aware of that. Which actually gives you, at the moment, a physical document. But again, I'm sure that many elderly people in care homes will fall through the cracks of the system because it's hard to reach everybody. And many, some children don't know. I remember another testimony of a Belgian girl who came to our group and said that the parents, the grandmother, she was seeking help for her grandmother. Both her children voted leave, and they thought because she was married to a Brit, she didn't need to apply for settled status. And and luckily the niece was wise enough to come to us, so she helped her grandmother, and she was sorted and she got settled status. But imagine how many of these cases there are in Britain, especially when you're married to a Brit and you live, fully integrated into your maybe British group of people, and you sometimes no longer even have links to EU citizens. So it's that's the worrying bit of all these people who don't know. And after the 30th of June, and I really like to stress again this date, may found themselves, becoming illegal, becoming unlawful residents.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to have to wrap it up in a moment, but before we say goodbye, are there any final messages that you would like to share? I know you want to stress that people need to apply before June the 30th. But yeah, Cosi, do you want to go first on this? Final messages.
Obviously, the deadline in 20 working days, but also if you come across somebody who has missed the deadline and is maybe worried about applying after the deadline, tell them to just do it as soon as possible. Just get it done. A lot of people are reluctant to apply. It sticks in their core. It stinks, but it's one of those things where you have to be pragmatic, put your pride in your pocket and just get on with it. Hold your nose if you have to. Reach out for help. The 72 grant funded organizations are actually funded until the end of September, so they will all be carrying on. And a huge part of my work is to hold people's hands. They come in with the weight of the world on their shoulders, really worried, don't know what to do about this thing. Why am I going to have to make this immigration application now? I came here exercising free movement. What's going on? And I try to make the process easy and simple. And it's easy for me because I know how to do it. I go bish, bash, bosh, scan the document, upload it, done. And I make sure that they leave happy and smiling. And you can see the relief on their faces. They're so grateful. And I know it feels horrible, the thought that you have to do this, but just get on with it. Just do it. You will feel better for it.
And to be clear, Cosi, do you have to have everything done by the end of next month, or do you have to
just
have
have
applied
to have submitted the application, and you can add further evidence later. So just get it submitted.
Just get that first bit submitted.
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, when you make the application, in theory, you apply with a smartphone with an app that uses near field communication. It scans your passport, scans the microchip in your passport if it works. And then you enter your national insurance number, and in theory it automatically checks HMRC and DWP records for official contact only. That's usually only your annual tax return. So, and it looks for two contacts per year. So it's very normal for people to be asked for a second thing for each year. But sometimes it finds everything for all 5 years, and you don't have to supply anything. And you won't know whether there are gaps in that record until you've made the application, until you're in the middle of the application. So there is a little link that says view which years to provide evidence for. Click on that. If it says provide evidence for this year, it means 2 pieces of evidence 6 months apart. If it says provide evidence for 6 months of this year, you just need one NHS appointment letter. Please come to have your smear test. As long as it's got your name, a UK address, and a relevant date on it, that's fine. Junk mail, you have been pre-approved for a capital credit card, anything like that. So the type of evidence that's accepted is quite good. And if you can't find something, get in touch with a grant-funded organization, get it submitted, and then look for, okay, what do I need? And when the caseworkers start looking at the cases, they get in touch with the applicants and say, we need more evidence of your residence. And that's when they say the month and the year, so not just the year. So then they say, we need evidence of your residence from November 2017 to July 2018. And then you just need to find something in between that time period.
Okay, that's good. Okay, Elena?
Well, my final message is, again, stressing, the deadline. And if you meet any EU citizen, I know that's what I do. I always ask whether they have applied for settled status. And so it's very important, to do that, because you'll be surprised of how many people, even of working age, have got no idea. I met a taxi driver who thought that his national insurance number was enough for him, for his family, for his daughter. And, another colleague was in the same position. So it's extremely important. And the other message I'd like to say is, if you know anybody, send them to In Limbo. We are there to listen to you, to listen to your story if you want to leave it, and to direct you to the relevant, organizations. And, not only you're directed to that organization, but you can also find friends, find support, because as Cosi was saying, a lot of people arrive with, with the weight of the world on their shoulders. And then they realize when they find friends, when they find support, and when they find an organization giving them practical support, everything becomes easier. So, that's my final message. And the second one is read our books, share our books. As I was saying, not-for-profit books. Here they are. Yes, I have one, and that's In Limbo too. And so that we can raise awareness of all our issues and make more and more people aware of them. So that's all.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Elena. Thank you so much, Cosi, for joining us here. Richard's just come back online. Hello, Richard. How you doing?
Hello. I just wanted to advertise the next couple of webinars, just in case you didn't have it to hand, Graham. Next week, we have a standard open forum, as we have in previous weeks, so no registration required for that. You can just turn up with the link, which will be mailed out as usual. And then the week after that, we're kind of flipping things around. We've got Sue Wilson of Remain in Spain and Debbie Williams of Brexpats Hear Our Voice. And the title of the webinar is The Expat Perspective, Setting the Record Straight. So we will obviously hear stories as to, I mean, it's in line with In Limbo 2, really, isn't it? It's about what it's like to be a UK citizen in the EU. And I hope they'll give us some advice for those of us after tonight who are thinking about escaping from this hellhole and going to live in the EU, but it's going to be difficult. There's more obstacles to overcome. I hope they can tell us how it can be done, but that's rather depressing thought. The week after that, we have a webinar. This is on the 16th of June on the subject of Erasmus+. And the speakers there are Andrew Adonis, Chair of the European Movement, Jackie Jones, ex-MEP, and Julie Ward, ex-MEP. So that's another good one. And we have further webinars set up for later in the year. So please keep in touch and make sure you see the details. If you're not on the mailing list, drop me an email and I'll put you on. It's richard@grassrootsforeurope.org. And I hope to see you all again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Elena. Thanks, Cosi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.